EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. It's officially October 1st. Johnny Mack, we made it through the first month of the NFL season. Eagles sitting at 2-2. How you doing on this October 1st?
I didn't even realize it. Happy Halloween month, everybody, I guess. So, yeah, it's getting...
Are you a Halloween person, John?
Well, not anymore. I'm a little old for Halloween, but I enjoy the fall colors. At least a little bit of a change up.
I'd say I'm a Halloween guy myself.
I don't enjoy the leaf cleanup, though. So I guess overall I wouldn't be, too much leaf cleanup.
Yeah, let's get into some Eagles stuff this morning. I want to welcome everybody in. Thanks to BetUS, by the way, for sponsoring our 2-hour show today. So go to betus.com.pa. Big shout out to them for there's Twitch saying Red October month. Yeah, we'll see what the Phillies are able to do this month. Appreciate all of our members in the chat this morning and all of our viewers. Good to see everybody in here. Tuesday, coming off an overreaction Monday. Felt like the sky was falling a little bit. Johnny Mack yesterday. You talked me off the ledge a little bit. Nick Sirianni spoke yesterday. Any takeaways from what Nick had to say yesterday? A couple things I saw that he said making the headlines as he continues to just talk.
I didn't really look at what other people were talking about. From my perspective, I'm concerned about the defense and the defensive scheme, which should be no surprise for anybody who listens to this program. But it's interesting because I've talked to Nick about this in the past, and this is the first time he's had an experienced defensive coordinator, unless you want to count Matt Patricia, but that was, a weird situation. And he's had very young coordinators in the past, and he's had no problem, putting his foot down. And for instance, 2021, when he first got here, we had a lot of the same complaints about the coverage and how soft it was. And, he went into Jonathan Gannon and said, look, we got to tighten it up. We got to, I get what we're trying to do as far as limiting explosive plays, but it's got to be a happy medium. And things kind of took off, and they were a top 10 defense despite a lack of talent. And then the next year they really took off and had one of the best defenses in the NFL. And here we are, same complaints, same problem, which should be no surprise to people because they're running the same scheme. So, but this time you got a veteran guy with a reputation and all that, and nobody's going to question Vic Fangio, and nor should they, and all that kind of narrative. And, I asked Nick, probably not the best question he wanted to hear, but does he feel comfortable saying, hey, Vic, we got to tighten this up like he did to Jonathan Gannon?
Yeah, it's a completely fair question.
Oh, it's fair.
Yeah.
But that's where we are. That's not where they wanted to be, I guarantee you, after 4 weeks of the season. Right. So I know everybody's focused about the offense and the terrible offense and this and that. That's about players not being out there. That will take care of itself with AJ and Devontae and Lane Johnson. That will take care of itself to a certain degree. Now, then you can talk about where they should be when those guys are back. When you don't have those guys, you're going to have some troubles. So, not that I'm excusing it, because they could have played better on the offensive side, obviously. But again, I think it takes care of itself to a large degree. Defensively, they got some issues. And they're not going away unless they fix them, because there's not all pro talent on the bench that's coming back from injury, which is what's going to happen on the offensive side. So to me, that's the biggest issue, and that's most now. And I'm going to get to talk to Vic Fangio today. Reporters, it's coordinator day, and I'm sure the primary focus from his perspective is going to be on the tackling, and maybe that takes care of all the problems. To be honest, at least from the perspective of, look, if you're going to play off coverage, you got to tackle. And if you miss 12 to 16 tackles, depending on which service you like, True Media, Pro Football Focus, Next Gen Stats, had him at 16. missed tackles. You're probably not talking about the coverage as much, but I think it's
that's just a joke. I mean, 16 missed tackles. That is just insane.
yeah. Well, 12 is insane.
Yeah.
And True Media had him at I think 11. PFF had him at 12. Next Gen Stats had him at 16. So they're a little that. And by the way, that also tells you the subjectiveness of those numbers. But either way, it ain't good. When you're at that level, it ain't good. So that will, if you tighten that part of your and you should. I mean, that's just a bad day, and you can bring the weather into it, and guys being gassed and all that kind of stuff. But you got to play in the conditions like any weather game. You got to play in January in Green Bay. You got to go to January in Green Bay, and you got to play. And for many years, I think the Bucs are the best example. I wrote about this yesterday. And if you go back to the championship game here, that was the second game they won in under 40 degrees in their history. And they came into the league in 1976. You got to play in the weather, whether it's cold or whether it's extremely hot, and you got to find a way to persevere. So that's not going to be an excuse.
One of my biggest things with this defense is, they're just so damn inconsistent. I mean, how do you go from a world beater a week ago versus the Saints looking, like what we were hoping they looked like, even better than that maybe, and then you fall off a cliff again, and you're you can't stop Baker Mayfield, and they put up 470 yards or whatever it was on us, and it's not even a good running team, and they ran for 150 plus yards or whatever. I don't get the inconsistency.
Not the same. I in a weird way, like I say, styles make fights. That's the old axiom in boxing. Sure. New Orleans, with all their explosiveness, they play 12 personnel. They play max protection. They try to run the football. You can play those 5, and he even played the 6-man fronts. Nobody plays more 11 personnel than Tampa Bay, and they're out there in their nickel, which has been when they're bad. When they're out there with their nickel defense, their 4-man front, and the extra corner, that's when they've been bad. Each game is not a vacuum. So when you talk about that, everybody's got a different game plan. Everybody plays a little bit differently. Obviously, there's a lot of copycats in the league, and there's only so much. They're going to see more 11 personnel than Saints type of football. I guarantee you that. So they better fix it. But yeah, I mean, the Saints were just a good matchup in hindsight. And the fact that they played the way the Eagles want to play, or at least played the way the Eagles can play right now defensively, and be successful. Whereas the Bucs, balls out quick, spreading the field, no pass rush, coverage is soft, and you can't tackle, and you got what you got.
I'm talking to Vic today, Johnny Mac. What's on your mind as you go into that? What do you want to hear from Vic Fangio as a reporter after a game like that, after inconsistency like this through the first weeks of the season? I know you only get to ask 1 or 2 questions, but what are some of the things you want to hear or you want to be asked from Vic Fangio today after a performance like that?
Well, I think, number one, we don't want to hear anything. We want.
No, but there's certain questions. I mean, that
we want to hear what he says, and that's our job. So just from that standpoint, I think, and I'm not saying that from your perspective. I think a lot of fans don't realize that. Like, what is John? I don't want to hear anything. I want to hear what he has to say and explain what.
But there's an art to asking the questions to get some.
Well, with the coverage, with the off-man coverage and the lack of press coverage. I mean, part of it's just baked in. So a lot of people are hyper focused on that. But the numbers, and I would imagine, unfortunately, I don't even want to bring up the numbers to Vic because he'll immediately dispute them and say, as I just said, with the subjective nature of tacklings, I just get, True Media, Pro Football Focus, and Next Gen, they all have a different number. So this 88% numbers floating around, if you say 88%, he's going to dispute it. I guarantee that. So I'm not going that direction, but I do want to phrase it in a way where, there's a lot of off coverage. There's a lot of soft coverage. I already know the reason why, but you want to hear, is there a happy medium when you're struggling? So something of that nature. I think that's number one on the list. And then number two on the list is personnel driven. For me, it's Bryce Huff. Like, again, I'm at the point where he can't be this bad. So I don't think the coaching staff is utilizing him properly. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm believe me, I'm open
Isn't that
to
kind
that.
of giving Bryce a pass, though? Like, Vic
Well,
Fangio's been
I
around
don't think
for-
it's giving them a pass from the perspective of, I want to see them try it. And then if it doesn't work, if you want to call that a pass, fine. I don't know the definition, but like, I think there's this assumption that, when I say, or anybody says that Vic is, and Vic uses this because he's a smart guy, his defense is gap and a half. It's not really aggressive. It's more read and react, and he'll balk at that, but it is. But the reason he balks at that is because that's just the base. That's just the default setting, so to speak, the Control-Alt-Delete setting for the Eagles defense. If it's 3rd and 15, you got wide 9 guys out there, playing aggressive football, trying to get the quarterback. Now, in those types of situations, which have been too rare, but when you do get in that situation, I would love for them to design something to get Bryce Huff loose, even if it's once or twice early in the game. And if he falters at that, all right, go back to what you're doing and say, hey, Bryce, but right now you're having a player who's proven, again, I go back to the Jets writers and Rich Cimini, and he's proven he can get to the quarterback in a limit, in a limited role, but he's proven he can get to the quarterback at the NFL level when he's in those types of aggressive situations, and the Eagles haven't utilized it. So why aren't they utilizing it? That's a concern to me. And then, from a standpoint of guys playing poorly, Nakobe Dean, unfortunately, I think would lead that list.
He's been terrible.
He's not been good. At some point you got to say, well, maybe there's just not that good. And maybe that's the case. Maybe I'll get to that case with Bryce Huff. I think
where I think many are getting to, whether it's the scheme or not. I think many are getting to, hey, this dude just can't play. I mean, he struggles to get off any block.
Maybe. But how do you explain the difference between Nakobe Dean and again, it's still limited, and I expect Nakobe to get a little bit better, is he's played a little bit at the NFL level before he got hurt. He wasn't good last year, and now he's played 4 games and he hasn't been good this year. So now you're up to 8, 9 games, and he hasn't played good. Bryce has has stuff in the can that says he can play good. That to me is the difference. It wasn't in this city, so people don't care, but it existed, and it's NFL football, and that hasn't existed yet with Nakobe. So, but I still think Nakobe's got an opportunity to get better. The problem is, I think the ceiling is kind of limited. I think we've seen the ceiling, and that's on Howie Roseman, and maybe they're both on Howie Roseman because they don't dump assets, and everybody's happy with Zach Bond. But essentially, with Zach Bond, he's played 2 good games, 2 really good games, and 2 poor games. So you talk about that consistency in week to week. And, maybe that's what you're going to have, the best case scenario with a $3.5 million player,
That's not dumping assets. I mean, the problem with the defense, John, is that the first round draft picks, there's 3 of them on the damn defensive line, and they're hit or miss. They show up when they want to show up. I mean, look, this is the Howie Roseman is going to come into the crosshairs eventually with this, John. And it's not entirely wrong talking about Bryce Huff, a $17 million acquisition, who's underperforming drastically. You're talking about 3 first-round picks, 2 of them underperforming in a big way. One of them just shows up some days, and some days he doesn't, show up. That's your defense. If those dudes step up, we're not having these conversations about the defense. But Howie's going to have to eventually answer for some of those picks. No? Nakobe Dean, a 3rd-round pick. That's another guy. I know you're not maybe expecting 3rd-round picks to be world beaters, but you got a piece of defense together, and that's
they expect. A lot of Eagles fans expect 6th-round picks to be world beaters. So, look, Nolan Smith has played a little bit better, but not great. Jordan Davis has been a disappointment. He's in the disappointment category for me. Jalen Carter is like, I think Jalen Carter showed up. The guy's playing, I don't know how many snaps, and
that was good.
Tapping out to the Heat eventually. But my God, that's not the day to say Jalen Carter's not giving effort, and he's getting double teamed coming off that Saints game, so he played 52 snaps. In that kind of heat, getting double teamed virtually every play coming off the Saints game. So I don't think he played poorly. The problem is when people are sliding protection to him, other guys got to show up. And other than Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat, who are both playing well, all the young players are, even Milton Williams. I know everybody's excited about Milton Williams. I love Milton personally. He's been nothing. And this is a contract year for him where he really wanted to show out and make some big money, whether it's here or somewhere else. And he's just been average. Moro Ajomo, people are excited about him because it's more unknown.
It's starting to feel like this whole scheme, and I know we've been critical of it, but it's starting to feel like it's like a talent killer. It takes great players, and it's just like that. Everybody can. Maybe that's why the Dolphins hated it.
Well, maybe I go the other side. Maybe more of the talent is overrated. Look, guys show up. Really good players show up no matter the scheme. They might not like it. Fletcher Cox didn't like it when he went from Jim Schwartz to Jonathan Gannon, but he showed up eventually, even as an aging player. Khalil Mack played well in this defense. When he was Defensive Player of the Year, big time players are going to show up, no matter the scheme. And for the you look at Miami last night. Oh, Mike McDaniel, what an offense! What an offense! But people, I saw the first guy, and I'm not naming names because I'm sure he's not the first. I'm saying the first guy I saw, I knew it was coming, but the first guy I saw who said, "This is not Kellen Moore's offense. This is Nick Sirianni's offense," coming off the Tampa Bay game. I'm like, people who think like that need help.
Well, I have a question on that real quick. And we have Cayden Steele. We're going to get to a break in a second here. Bring up Cayden. Cayden, I see you in the green room, brother. We're getting to you in a minute. Appreciate everybody in the chat. We talk about this offense, John. And I did see somebody do a breakdown. Like, this doesn't look like Kellen Moore's offense.
Come on.
No, I'm not going there. But let me finish.
I'm not saying
Is it more on everybody immediately goes to, so it's Nick Sirianni's offense? Is it possible it's the quarterback? Where this is the offense that they're creating around his skill set.
Oh, God, yeah. They created the offense around the quarterback. That was the thing that I think frustrated.
Is that why it still looks the same? Because they can't do much of the other stuff that Kellen did in the past, because that's not what Jalen Hurts does.
Well, on Sunday, they couldn't do anything. They were the number 2 offense in the NFL, granted, small sample size. On Sunday, they didn't have freaking A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson. Why is it so hard for people to understand that? Should they have persevered a little bit better? Should they have had better style points? Sure. but they were always, I predicted them to score 17 points. And that was probably being, generous in my mind. What are people expecting? They were number 2. It all looked great. It's Kellen Moore's this and Kellen Moore's that. You got what you want. Then a bunch of guys get injured and you look like shit, which tends to happen in the NFL. Why is it so surprising? No, Nick took over because AJ's not in there and Devontae's not. He conveniently took over to protect Kellen Moore. People are morons. I'm sorry.
Get to a couple super chats, John, before we get to our break. We'll talk more about this with Cayden Steele coming up next. Did you see the Darius Slay stuff? Trey Brown checks in. Is there a way to get rid of Darius? Bad teammate. Everybody's not happy about that, which I do think. I mean, come on, Slay. You got to read the room. I think especially when you're wearing a C on your chest, you got to read the room. All,
Slay is not a bad teammate. That is incorrect.
Well,
I mean, the problem with fans and Slay is a very uplifting person. And he's friends with everybody, and he likes to uplift players everywhere around the league. That's what he does. I go back to, and I know we got to get to Cayden, so I don't want to go deep into my basketball analogies. But in the old days when Julius Erving was strangling Larry Bird on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and then it changed to Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson kissing each other at the center court, it's different. It's a different world. These guys are all friends. Is there competitiveness? It's like a college-like environment. It's a fraternity, and they have a lot of respect for each other. And guys, when they change jerseys and things like that, that's not to say there isn't some anger and some things like that in a physical game, but for the most part, they're not going to play. They're not going to go, woe is me, and show the emotion. And you can't. You really can't.
Yeah, I know.
You got to get back to work the next day.
You got to read the room. They just got destroyed by Baker Mayfield's box, and the next day he's popping up talking.
Well, that part, I mean, the PR part of it, yes,
that's what I'm talking. I get they're going to be friends. I have no issue with that. They're all humans, man. I get it. They're playing a game.
The PR part of it, I agree with you. But remember, when you're playing public relations, you're doing it. You're not being honest. So I don't. From a personal perspective, I don't care with stuff like that. I literally don't care. But the only thing I will say to the questioner is he's not a bad teammate. You might not like what he does, and you might not like that he embraces players on other teams. And most fan bases don't like that. And I get it why, but that's just PR shit. I mean, he's a great.
He might not be. I don't think he's a bad teammate, but you could argue he shouldn't have a C on his chest if you're going to act like that.
Well, he got voted to be a C on his chest by his teammate,
which might give you an inkling into the the culture of inside the locker room.
Not deserving his own teammates, but Nick didn't decree captains. They got voted by their teammates.
Let's get to our commercial break. We have 3 more super chats we'll get to. I'm going to get to all of them. I want to get to our commercial break so we can get to Cayden Steele. Do appreciate James Carver, Alexander Harris, and Saquads. We will get to you guys. Always get all the super chats. So thank you guys for the support this morning. Let's get to our commercial break. Before I do that, everybody, I want to remind you of BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. Use that promo code YouTube150. That gives you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% on your second and third deposit. So go to betus.com.pa. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 customer support, and they'll even give you up to 10% back on your losses twice a year. So if you place some losing bets, you can recoup some of that money. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa and use the promo code YouTube150. Birds 365. Back in 3 minutes, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. the New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. It's October 1st, everybody. We made it through the first month of the NFL season. Joined now by Cayden Steele of NJ.com. Cayden Steele, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you on this Tuesday morning. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Good to see you, Cayden. You're back from your first trip to Tampa. Is that correct?
Yes.
In the oppressive heat.
Yes. It was
Probably couldn't get into Clearwater, I imagine, because of Hurricane Helene. But how bad was the weather down there?
it was hot. I mean, first time at the stadium, so I didn't even know where the press box was. So, I was walking around trying to find it, for 5 minutes, and I could just feel the sweat, just dripping. So, look, we talk about the players. I couldn't even imagine, having to wear pads for, about, 3.5 hours. To play in that type of heat, because I could barely make it 5 minutes to the press box. So
yeah, it was a weather game. I say that to people and they go, what do you mean it was a weather? Football is known for weather games, famous weather games, but everybody thinks of the cold. But the heat can be a weather game as well. And that was a weather game. And the Eagles didn't handle it as well as Tampa Bay, which is common. To me, it's kind of common sense because Tampa's used to the climate. It's still difficult for them as well, but it's an advantage, just like Green Bay has an advantage. January in Lambeau Field, and they had a big advantage. But the bigger advantage, Cayden, no A.J. Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lane Johnson, and that offense went as expected. Why is everyone so upset about the offense? Why is it that to me is simple. The defense we'll get to. That's not simple. The offense, everything's going to be fine after the bye.
yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any reason to panic about the offense. Look, I think, maybe some people got excited about how Fred Johnson played against the Saints, and they thought maybe he could go in and do it again for a week. Don't think he was as good against the Bucs, and maybe people had high hopes for Jahan Dotson, but there's a reason the Commanders wanted to trade him in division and had no problem doing it, and they're like, just take him off, our hands. I didn't expect the offense to play good. I didn't think they'd score many points, but in the back of my head, and Johnny made a good point, I thought maybe the defense could, kind of build off that performance, but obviously they did not. They showed that, they're more like the defense that we saw in week 2 and week 1, which is not very good. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason to panic about the offense. We saw what they did against Green Bay. They still were fine against Atlanta. Yeah, and that game they didn't have AJ Brown. Once they get AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson back, still think Kellen Moore's a pretty good offensive coordinator. They'll put up points. I'm not really worried about that, but I mean, it doesn't matter if you can put up points if you can't stop teams. And I think that's where they're in trouble right now. So, yeah, no reason to panic about the offense. If you are, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to do that.
Last question on the offense, because as John mentioned, the defense is a wide web of things that we can get into with that one. But just your thoughts on Jalen Hurts. 7 turnovers now, second in the league, 4 interceptions, 3 fumbles lost. A lot of fans, starting to call, for Jalen Hurts to step up and be better. Cayden, your thoughts on Jalen Hurts through 4 games this year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he has to clean up the turnovers, and it's more than this year. It's been a problem for the last few years. And it's tough because, I mean, it's weird to say this, and it's probably not fair. Other than the turnovers, I think he's played well. Like, I think he's done some really good things, and I think he's made some really good throws in almost every game. But it's tough when you're not protecting the football and you're being careless. And, yeah, I mean – you paid him a huge extension. I think you expect him to be a little better than what he currently is. I don't think by any means he's been terrible. And like some of the situation, with not being able to throw to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and have those guys as security blankets, it definitely has made an impact over the last 2 or 3 weeks offensively. But the turnovers are a huge, huge, huge problem. And some of them, you got to take with a little context. Like against the Saints, I'm not really sure if that's on Jalen or if that's on Devontae. I mean, some of those things that we don't really know exactly what's happening.
Well, I'm comfortable saying that one was on Devontae, but I'm a little surprised, Cayden, to get to the turnovers, and I'm glad, that's the one thing that they do need to clean up. I'm a little surprised Nick kind of gave him a pass for the fumble, the strip sack. I'm like, I mean, yeah, all right. Levante David goes by you. That doesn't mean he evaporated into thin air. He's coming back. That's a really good player. I think he's got to be more conscious and have more ball security in that type of instance. Were you surprised that Nick kind of said, not gave him a complete pass, but he essentially did?
I mean, not really. If you're going to ask me from a sense, I think that Nick tries to talk around things a lot and generally tries to, back his players. I'm not surprised. Maybe he felt like if he did that, he felt like he was going to throw Jalen under the bus a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it was a clear instance in that play where it's an alarm of a lack of pocket presence for a guy who's a 5th-year player. And I think honestly the picks, the pick in the Saints game, even the Bates pick, I'm not really worried about. It's been the last 2 fumbles that have mainly worried me because I think sometimes he's just trying to create a little too much in the pocket. He's trying to buy too much time when he just needs to get rid of it.
And Fred got one back in that game.
Yes,
that could have gone the other way as well. A fumble. The interception, the one in the end zone against Green Bay, that was egregious.
Yes.
And he had a dropped right before that. He had a dropped interception that was pretty egregious. He was bad the Green Bay game from a throwing perspective. I think there were 4 turnover worthy throws. But ever since then, it's been okay. But yeah, the fumbling is still a problem, and the pocket presence, is the bigger problem. I think you got that. And they're kind of, 6 sacks. It's like, Tampa's coming. And sometimes it's on the quarterback as well as the pass protection, because sometimes you got to speed up as a quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some people are hesitant to do it because of what Jalen Hurts did in 2022, but he's obviously regressed and he's not the player that he used to be. Do I think you can still win with him? Yeah. And I think some of these problems are fixable with good coaching. I mean, yeah, it should be, right? Like you should be able to teach some of this out and be able to help him get back on track, because I still think he can extend plays. I still think he has a good arm, and I still think he brings attributes And we saw it in that Saints game where like he's a weird player where like he's not very consistent, or he hasn't been very consistent. He has problems with turnovers, but I mean, he has a knack for making clutch plays and big plays.
Yeah,
and
he
big
plays
moments.
for 6. He's relentless. That's what
Yes.
I say. He plays 60 minutes. You might think you have him, but you got to play the whole 60 minutes or he's going to make a play somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And that's a very positive part of Jalen Hurts. But he does. He needs to clean some things up. So I don't want to say there's nothing to worry about, but I'm saying offensively, when AJ's back, post by and Devontae and Lane, we're back to nitpicking. All right, they didn't do this well. They didn't do, but it's a really good offense, and that's a better place to be than we're going to go here. Defense. I mean, this defense, Cayden. You mentioned they played well in New Orleans. I think that was a style thing. I think they're fine when they can play their 5-man fronts and Vic rolled out the 6-man fronts, and New Orleans plays all this 12 personnel and max protection. And they run wide, and it's play action. And that's exactly what the Eagles want to do. When they get spread out with 11 personnel or even, 4 receivers on the field, they're bad. They're bad in coverage. They can't rush the passer, and they can't tackle. I don't know if there's anything else when it comes to defense. How do you come back from that?
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. The Saints game might have been a little fool's gold because of the stylistic thing. And also, I mean, the Saints offense might not be what they showed through the first 2 weeks. They're starting to slow down a little bit in general. So you got to take, 1 or 2 weeks doesn't mean you're going to have the best offense in the league. I mean, CJ did bring that up, at the end. Which is true to a certain degree. But at the same time, I don't think that's the Eagles defense we're going to see very often. Yeah, they're bad. I mean, it's 4 weeks. Maybe they get better. But right now, they are bad in almost every area. And it's going to be tough to make the playoffs if you can't stop teams. And I think the number one issue, and look, I get the Buccaneers kind of negated the pass rush with the quick passing, and they've talked about being a little stickier on the back end and all that. So I'm not saying the pass rush was to blame in this game, but it's been 4 weeks, and we've seen minimal pass rush. You can make an argument your best pass rusher at this point, and not even an argument, your best pass rusher on this team is Brandon Graham.
Yeah, it definitely is.
He's 36 years old, and this was supposed to be a retirement tour. And look, maybe maybe it wasn't going to be a retirement tour. He's still like a
I'm taking a lap. I said he was going to play more. The counterintuitive, because he's got nothing to save. Now he might have something to save because he might come back. But
he keeps playing like this. He'll be back for another year.
It's time to empty the gas tank, and he's playing extremely well. I have no problem with how much they're playing Brandon Graham, but you're right. I mean, everybody else, it's like, Jalen Carter's a good player, and they were sliding protection to him, and nobody else could take advantage of it. Nobody.
No. And that's a problem, right? I mean, even in Brandon playing well, I think ideally you would like him to be a high-end rotational player at this stage of his career, not a starter. And Josh Sweat, I know he registered a sack against Tampa, but he's regressed. I mean, what we saw at the end of last year, I was thinking maybe that, started off 2023, the first half of the season looked really well. And that's back half of the year, he just wasn't. I mean, I know they talked about he got some pressures and all that, but just didn't seem like he was having as much of an impact on the game. And I thought, maybe that had to do with, Desai and Patricia and all that happening. Everyone kind of regressed. But I mean, this year, he's been kind of average. Just he's not the player that, he's never been like an all-pro player. But at one point, it was a guy that you could feel confident could get you 10 sacks. I don't feel that way anymore. And Bryce Huff, I don't know. I was excited to see him play this year. I thought he had a lot of potential.
Yeah, so was I. I can't explain that one. We were talking about Bryce Huff. At some point, I'm like, you got to let him do what he did well in New York. I get your scheme. I get you want to make him into a well-rounded player, but maybe that's out the window. At least try to utilize what he can do. I'd like to see them, wide 9 it on 3rd and 10 and try to get him loose to see if he can gain some confidence and maybe get going. But I don't even think Vic thinks that way. He wants a well-rounded player. I'm not sure because Yeah, it's an indictable offense in the NFL if you criticize Vic Fangio, but I'm going to do it. Everybody's not a well-rounded player. To be coaching is take advantage of the strengths, minimize the deficiencies as much as possible. Let's see him. Let's see him try. I haven't seen any attempt to get this player any confidence and put him in a position to succeed, which to me is coaching.
Yeah. And the thing I'm having the hardest part buying is that Bryce Huff has completely forgot how to be.
That's what I mean.
And I know
How is that possible?
I know some people make the argument about like, oh, the Jets D line was strong and he got a lot of free, easy opportunities. I would also like to believe that Howard Roseman and staff watched the tape and they didn't just pick a guy that was getting easy sacks based off double teams and getting free sacks. And like to believe that they saw something in terms of his pass rush ability. I mean, he was one of the most efficient pass rushers in the league based off of snap count. I don't think that was by mistake. But he's been bad. I mean, and some of that probably has to do with coaching, John. I agree. Like you got to try something different. You can't keep putting him in this position. And perhaps, knowing that he's struggling against the run and he struggled adjusting to this role and 17 million a year is a lot of pressure on top of his shoulders. Maybe he's just overthinking.
He's definitely lost his confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not playing with any confidence whatsoever.
No. And you can't pass rush if you're worried about, is this going to be a run play? Is this going to be that? Like, he's probably all over the place where he's lost it. And I don't know what you do to fix that. I mean, maybe you do switch. I mean, we'll see if Fangio does. Maybe I don't know if you sit him for a game to try to just give him a breather. Maybe the bye week, will do him some good and he'll come back rejuvenated. But yeah, it's been a disaster, so far, to be frank. Whether you want to blame it on coaching or Bryce Huff, I mean,
yeah, it has been. It's been 4 weeks, still small sample size, but you're right. It's been a disaster. And by the way, at some point, Howie Roseman's going to start to get antsy because he made that decision. And, I'm sure from his perspective, I'm not 100%, but I'm sure he's more leaning towards my camp. Like, what the hell, dude? Let's try to get this guy going.
Yeah.
And that'll be an interesting conversation if that's ever had, Howie and Vic. But we'll see how it shakes out. As far as the coverage, Cayden, Doug, for our longtime NFL reporter, put out a stat. I've not been able to confirm it. I don't know if it's 100% true because, I said, the missed tackle stats, you had True Media, PFF, and Next Gen Stats. They all had different numbers. So this stuff is always subjective. But the number was 88% of the time this season so far, the Eagles have had no cornerbacks in press coverage, which by far leads the NFL. And Doug's assessment was I don't know how you play modern football with that being the case. And he's got a good point when you watch the Eagles play defense. How do you change that? I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to people because the Eagles have been playing this system this will be the 4th year. Yeah. Now they just have the guy that created it. Has the league just passed by this particular scheme?
I think it's possible. I think people got excited with it coming in, thinking he was going to be very different than Jonathan Gannon and Deshaun Desai, but people forget that they were part of his system that he created. We saw in that Tampa Bay game, that's where it was the most problematic because they weren't doing anything crazy. It's not like Liam Cohen came in with this innovative offense that was going to take over the NFL. He was just getting the ball out of the hands, of Baker very quickly. To play
very quick.
Odd one. Yeah. Evans, especially on the outside near the sideline where they're just throwing quick little passes, quick little screens, and they were making guys miss. I mean, he was getting the ball out and, just very fast, 5-10 yard throws, quick slants. And the Eagles did nothing to challenge that. Especially if you're not going to play any press coverage and you're going to play, 10 yards off the ball, they're going to just dink and dunk and dink and dunk. And that's what they did. And if you don't have a team that's good fundamentally and they don't tackle well and I mean, it's a bad mix. And yeah, John, I heard you before I popped on in the green room. It's like, yeah, maybe Vic will say today, like, look, this scheme works if you tackle well, if you tackle the guy in front of you.
That's my fear. Yeah.
Yes. And part of that's probably true, but at the same time, you've been a coordinator in the league for, 30 years or whatever. And he's been a successful coordinator, but at some point you have to adjust and you have to be willing to adapt with the times. And these offenses are going to pick them apart if they can. I mean, if I were an offensive coordinator right now, and obviously you have to have the playmakers that Tampa Bay do, like with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So not every team will be able to do this. But if I have a good set of playmakers, I don't need to go deep on the Eagles. I can just methodically tear them apart, but just dinking and dunking. And look, I think the secondary, I don't think the safety play has been good, but I think Quentin Mitchell's been good and Darius Slay has been good. And maybe that's not their strengths in press coverage. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know, because Quentin Mitchell went down to the Senior Bowl and did it, and he looked fine, and they haven't used him in that as much this year.
It's also making life way harder for the pass rushers. We're talking about pass rush that can't get home. Well, it's a lot harder to do it when Baker Mayfield's holding the ball for 1.8 seconds.
Yes, yes, and it's a fair point. They always talk about pass rush and the secondary as a marriage. If one's not working, the other's not going to work as well. Right. And look, both aren't working right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with Vic, to be honest. I mean, John, you said, it's fair to criticize him, through 4 weeks. He's a good defensive coordinator, but he does have a reputation for being a little stubborn and in his ways. And yeah, because it's worked for 30 years, but maybe it's not anymore. So we'll see. But that was a problem. I mean, the fact that they couldn't figure out something to get Baker off rhythm in that game, from the first two drives, a game's never over. And I know the special teams mishap by Isaiah Rodgers.
Green Bay came back from 28-0 and had a chance. I mean, and the Eagles cut it to, what was it, 24-14?
Yeah.
And if they could have got off the field after that Saquon run, setting up the touchdown early in the third quarter, boy, there's a lot of pressure on Tampa Bay at that point. And they're saying, oh, the snowball's coming down the hill. If the Eagles score again, that's a real football game. And I think it was 3rd and 7, and Baker scrambled for 10 yards. And then it was 3rd and 11 after that, and it was a 15-yard throw to Godwin. It's like, boy, it's, one stop they needed to potentially get back in that game.
And it's early in the game with, some of these short plays that, could be stopped in the backfield. Like the second drive, Chris Godwin, they throw it to him out of the backfield. Vontae Maddox comes up 100 miles an hour, and he just whiffs.
Yeah, that was a bad whiff.
It almost looked like he tried to whiff because he didn't want to tackle Godwin, who's a tough dude to bring down.
Yeah, it's just bad tackling.
I
think Bryce, he dove down the slip and slide there. Whoop.
Boy, I think Bryce Hupp's struggles have in some ways masked the struggles of Nakobe Dean, Avonte Maddox, and CJ, because they have not been good this season.
CJ, all bark, no bite right now.
And especially tackling. Boy, I don't know how many missed tackles Nakobe had, but
yeah, I think I saw somewhere, I don't know what site gave him credit, but I think someone gave him 6, which is not great. And if I'm wrong, someone could correct me, but I think I saw after the game.
Next gen stats, 6. Gave him 6.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's real. Yeah.
That's not good at all. I mean,
especially for the middle linebacker.
No, not at all. And you mentioned CJ. I mean, that doesn't surprise me as much because he's always kind of been a hit or miss player. And usually the thing, and we've seen that a little bit this year with the 4th down stop against Atlanta, a big 3rd down stop against the Saints. He makes up for some of that by making really outstanding plays. In 2022, he had 6 picks, and he makes up some of it for those missed tackling, the lapses in coverage by being a playmaker. But I don't know if it's been enough through 4 weeks where it's this time around, I think the bad outweighs the good. In 2022, it was the opposite. The good outweighed the bad. He's never been a super consistent player. He wasn't. It was a small sample size in Detroit last year, but he wasn't very good in Detroit either. He's had injuries over the last couple of years on top of that. And I think he brings something to the back end, but, part of being a safety is for safety, you got to be consistent. and he doesn't provide consistent play right now. And I don't know if that changes. I think that's just part of his play style, and that's a big concern. And he's missing tackles, and he's getting beat on touchdowns. And look, you can make an argument. Mike Evans pushed him off on that touchdown. He did get away with, a little bit of something there, but like at the same time, he's not good in coverage, and he's not good at tackling right now. And you're hoping that you live by the crazy play that he makes once in a while, but I don't know if that's good enough to be a good back end. So yeah, that's a concern. Jakobi, look, I think he's showing a little more promise this year at times. In the Green Bay game, I thought he played well, but we have to be honest. I mean, there's limitations. He's small. He doesn't get off blocks well. And if he's not tackling well, yeah, it's not great. I think Zach Bond's played well, but like I also think it's been a little inflated at the same time. Like I don't know.
Yeah, he's been up and down.
Most of this damn defense has been up and down. At what point is Howie going to have to answer for some of this, Kate? I mean, you're talking about 3 first-round draft picks on that defensive line. 2 of them have been very underwhelming. One of them shows up, when he wants to. You're talking about Nakobe Dean, the 3rd rounder. I was sold the Philadelphia Bulldogs, Cayden. That's what I was sold. Where's my bill of goods? Where is it? They're not showing up. At what point will Howie have to answer for some of the personnel deficiencies on the defensive side?
Yeah, I mean, he has to. Of those 4 players that he drafted, the only one that I feel confident saying is going to be a really good NFL player, I still believe, like, Jalen Carter might not dominate as much in Tampa Bay, but it was hot. And, like,
no, he's going to be good, but he's got to show up consistently, Cayden. Until you got to be week in and week out, man, as a 9th overall pick.
Yes. I think he'll get to that point eventually, though. He's still a second-year player. Like, I think it will come together for him. I'm not really worried about Jalen Carter. I would be worried about Jordan Davis at this point. Like, he has sacked against the Saints. Do I think he's the world's worst player? No, I think he's fine. But you drafted him 15th overall for a guy who's fine at best, and that's a concern. Nolan Smith, I think he's played better in terms of I think he's fine stopping the run, and he does some things. Like dropping back in coverage. He's not. I don't know if you want to be in that situation where he's going to want to go against wide receivers, but I don't think he's terrible at it. Like, he's not like he got burnt. Like, he does some things where he's I would say a useful player, but you don't draft a guy in the 1st round just to be a useful, versatile player. Like, guys got to get after the quarterback, and right now he's just obviously not a developed pass rusher, and that was kind of the knock on him coming out of Georgia, is that he didn't really have a pass rush arsenal yet, and he needed some time. So maybe Nolan Smith rounds out and he figures it out and he gets a little bigger next offseason, in year 3 is that step. But through 2 years, he's been a disappointment. I mean, and Nakobe, I think everyone thought he was going to be better than what he is, but there's a reason he dropped to the 3rd round. So, yeah, I mean, Howie has to answer it. Bryce Huff, I mean, James Bradbury last year. I mean, we're on a 2-year stretch where Howie Roseman hasn't been, I don't want to say not good at all, but very up and down, at least, is the best way to put it. So, yeah, he deserves, some of this blame. And I think it's a mix of things. It's a mix of poor coaching, from Nick Sirianni, and I think it's a mix of bad personnel decisions. And this team right now is getting hindered by both, especially on the defense, because, we've talked about offensively. I think they've done a fine job of building this thing. This should be one of the best offenses in the league when they're healthy. Defensively, it's a mess, and I don't think it's getting much better because, I mean, you're not going to be able to add a pass rusher really at the trade deadline. I mean, you're not going to be able to get a guy really.
That's where the offense is easily explainable. It's like, okay, you're going to get AJ Devontae and Lane Johnson back. You're going to get better no matter what. Defense, the fix is not so simple. One last question from me, Cayden. Nick Sirianni, is the city overreacting in a big way on Nick Sirianni, or are you starting to wonder, how good of a coach is this guy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still early in this season, but if you want to tie in the end of last season as well, I mean, yeah, I'm starting to wonder, because the whole thing that Nick is that he's the CEO, head coach now, and he preaches, the fundamentals and all this, and that's kind of his, his spiel. This team is not a fundamentally sound team.
Not at all.
They don't tackle well. They have killer penalties, like special teams mishaps. And look, if you're going to embrace being that CEO, head coach who's kind of control of everything, and that's your job, yeah, he deserves a large portion of the blame. And I'm sure Jeffrey Lurie and company are worried about Nick Sirianni at this stage. I mean, the end of last season, they decided to bring him back, even though how ugly it got. They wanted to give him one more chance. And look, through 4 weeks, I don't know what type of coach he is. I don't know what he does well. Like, I mean, that's the problem. I know, I forget who asked him this year, but like basically like what his job is going to be when he first brought him back. I mean,
what is it that you do here?
I don't know that. I know people talk.
Well, I don't know. You know, there's CEO coaches around the league. I don't. You know, but my problem with Nick Sirianni, I've already gotten it. And then last one for me at Cayden_Steele 19. Make sure you follow Cayden on the X platform. Can read him at NJ.com. Doing a great job there with our buddy Chris Franklin and Bob Brookover as well. Tremendous staff over there. I got my first guy. I'm sure you're going to get it. I saw it, and I you know, it's like, oh, this doesn't look like Kellen Moore's offense. This is now Nick Sirianni's offense. What because they performed very poorly in Tampa Bay, and it's like, to me, the whole setup from the get-go, and this is a Jeffrey Lurie problem, is bad because that's how people are going to run with it. You give people the baton, they're going to run any way they want, but you can also predict where they're going. This was predictable.
Yeah.
That anything, he can't win. I mean, give me a path to winning other than literally winning the Super Bowl. As far as week to week, like it's either Vic did this, Kellen did this. Oh, Nick screwed this up. Oh, that wasn't Vic. That wasn't Kellen. That's a Nick Sirianni call. Jeffrey Lurie should have seen this, shouldn't he have, Cayden?
Yeah, you make a good point because even let's say the Eagles turn around, which I have my doubts about this team being good. I know they talked about in the locker room after the bye week, and they're gonna then piece this together, and they think they will. I have my doubts because I don't think this personnel is getting better. But let's say they do turn it around, they get good, and they make a decent playoff push this year, and they get in, they make some noise. Nick's not going to get any of the credit. It's going to be Kellen's innovative offensive motion, eventually figures things out, and they catch fire. Vic Fangio, the old veteran coordinator, adjusts, and the defense starts playing well, and he gets all the credit. Nick's not going to get any credit in this situation, but every time they lose, he is going to get all the blame. So, is that unfair in a sense? Probably. Yeah, I mean, it's a lose-lose situation for Nick Sirianni, and that's why I was a little surprised that Jeffrey Lurie brought him back after last year. I mean, especially with the way that team collapsed. I don't know. I mean, it's one of the weirdest situations in the NFL. I'm not sure.
It was weird. I still don't think they figured that out, that collapse.
And I don't know. I mean, they don't talk about it, but you got to think in the last 2 or 3 months, they've been losing a lot of football games. I've taken in count of last season as well. And I know every year is a new year, and that's what they preach. But if you're a lot of this roster has returned, and ever since December of last year, you've been losing more than you've been winning under Nick Sirianni. And look, I still think they believe in him for the most part, but at some point, if this continues and you keep you're inconsistent, let's say they're 4-4 or 4-5. I just don't know the state of this team. I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sirianni, I think, could be in trouble if this continues to go down this path. So, but they didn't put him in a good position either. Wasn't really a fair opportunity with bringing in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, kind of stripping him of everything. And yeah, what does he do? I mean, we don't know for sure. People talk about it. I mean, he sits in meetings, and I'm sure he has some role, but I'm not sure if he gives you an advantage on game days. And maybe he did at first when he came in. He helped kind of give this team a jolt with I don't know. I mean,
aggressiveness, yeah.
Yes.
But now people don't like that.
No, it's a lose-lose situation for Nick, and I don't see him getting any prettier. And look, I can't. I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to blame him for everything that's gone wrong. I mean, Zander made a good point. I mean, Howie deserves a large portion of this blame, but Howie's not going anywhere. If we're just being honest, it's probably not going to happen.
No.
I'll upgrade that to definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So Nick's gonna take the all the blame, and he's gonna be the one that
In many ways, that's his job. Yes. What does he do? That's his job, to be the lightning rod, to take the criticism.
and he's got to do better though. Whatever his role is, this team looks flat, especially in the first quarter. And I get that some of with the offense not scoring, but defensively too, they generally look flat in every area. Like they don't look prepared to play, and like I mean that's a concern. Like I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say he's done a bad job because like I don't know what he does. Like it's how do I would feel like I would have to know more day by day what he actually does to impact the team to say he does bad in that area because we don't know for sure what the actual responsibility.
Well, everybody knows that's a Nick call, that's a Kellen call, that's a Vic call, that's a Nick call, that's a Kellen call. That's that's whatever. When it goes bad, he did it, Cayden.
Yeah.
So you do know what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he has much to do with this offense. I mean, like, yes, does he make situational decisions? Yeah, but like, is he scheming this up? I don't think so. Like,
No,
I think he's backed off.
No, it's Kellen's offense. For those who think it's Kellen's offense, and again, I got the first of those people. Oh, that Nick it took. I'm like, come on, people. Nick happened to take over without AJ, Devontae, and Lane. That's the time to take over. By the way, if you did do that, Cayden, you should fire the guy. If that's when you're going to take it back, you should fire the guy because you're set up for failure. And if you don't realize that, you probably should be fired.
Yeah. And look, I mean, if you want to argue that Kellen should be the one making these decisions on fourth down, I'm fine with that. If Nick should back off in that role, I mean, you make an argument. It hasn't been great decision making. But then if he does that, what role does he really have on game days? I mean, take away the in-game part. I mean, that's gone, and that's another responsibility stripped. Like, that's not going to happen. He's gonna stay involved in that regard at least, because if he doesn't have that, what does he have? Like,
well, and by the way, the Eagles want that. That's an organizational philosophy.
Yeah.
The Eagles want to be aggressive. So Jeffrey would not like it if Kellen. I think a lot of people think if Kellen were in charge that they would scale back on there. They would not, because at that point they would be told, "Nuh-uh, we're going for it," because that's an organizational philosophy. But I digress. Thank you, Cayden. Are you going down today to see Vic?
no, I won't be there. I believe Brookover will be there though.
Brookie will be there for NJ.com. We'll get to talk to the coordinators. It'll be interesting getting through the bye week. Coming out of the bye week, the schedule lightens up as well. So all should be well, at least in Eagles land, in a couple weeks. But it's going to be difficult getting there, obviously. Read Cayden at NJ.com. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cayden. See you, man. There's good stuff from Cayden Steele joining the show with us on Birds 365, an October 1st edition. Everybody, we made it through September. Johnny Matt, can you believe it? Already October. The season flies by. Though I feel like everything's flying by. The off season flew by. Now we're already in October. Before we know it, we'll be into the holidays and after Christmas, and the season will be gone. So enjoy it, everybody, the best we can. John, we have a bunch of super chats we're going to get to. So James Carver, that Greg, a new member. That Greg became a member today. So big shout out to you, that Greg 75. A bunch of super chats to hit. Amartine, Daddy gave some. Alexander Harris. That sounded odd saying Daddy, but that's his name. I don't know what I'm supposed to call him. Let's get to our break, John, and then we'll hit them when we get out of the break. Good stuff from Cayden Steele there. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button. Let me get to our commercial break. Before I do that, I'm going to tell you about BetUS and our good friends at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. Use the promo code YouTube150, and that'll give you 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit, and then you can get 125% on your second and third deposit. So deposit less and bet with more. BetUS has the best fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 customer support and up to 10% back on your net losses twice a year. So if you place a losing bet, like maybe a bet on the Eagles to win that game, you maybe get some of those losses back. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Use that promo code YouTube150. We'll be back in 3 minutes with Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, coming off an overreaction Monday. Week 4 in the books. Eagles moving into their bye week coming up. They're 2-2 going into the bye week. Many upset with the 2-2. John, we're going to get to a couple super chats here. Appreciate everybody, by the way, in the chat today. Been great as always. So thank you all for the support of the channel. So let's get to some of these super chats. John, I'm going to start with this one. Because we were talking about it before we had Cayden, and I do think this is a different than we talked about earlier. Daddy says, my issue with Slay is after the game, instead of saying silent or saying I didn't play good enough, he tweets his career stats. I respect the player he has been, but he wasn't that player in Tampa. Your thoughts on that part of it? Because I do understand your take on the going on Micah Parsons podcast, and that's just going to be Slay, in a way, and who gives a shit, but to go out there and tweet tweet the stat. I thought
my assessment is I wish players wouldn't do this stuff to begin with. I mean, they're only going to get themselves in trouble because people are going to be upset. I mean, he's a proud guy. He's a very successful player, and he's pointing that out, and he probably should ignore it. I mean, I agree with he should ignore it, but these players get shit on when they don't play well. And they live, and it's easy for me to say because I'm older and I remember a world without social media. A lot of them grew up in the world of social media, and it's like a big part of their lives. And they have a difficult time ignoring the shit, and they fight back, and they shouldn't, and they should ignore it. This has happened with AJ. It always happens with CJ. It happens with Slay. It happens with anybody that's got a big social media presence, because it is human nature that if somebody craps on you, I'm saying I'm cursing too much this morning. If somebody craps on you, you want to fight back. And if it were, if it were up to me, I'd ban everybody from social media on my football team. But it's not up to me. And if they want a better mental health standpoint, space, whatever you want to call it, they should probably ignore it and probably not do it. But we don't live in that society, so it is what it is. But yeah, it's human nature to fight back when people are criticizing you.
You understand when you're a professional, though, you got to do it in a certain way, especially as a leader and a captain of a football team that came off a bad loss. But I understand what you're saying. Thanks, Diddy, for the super chat. I'll call him Diddy for now. James Carver says, JD has been by far the best interior defensive line player in gap and a half, and he isn't screaming upfield. He's taking on primary gap and eliminating the reach while waiting to spin backside. People want JD to pass rush every down. That's not
well, they do.
That's not 1 and 2 down job.
Yeah, but he hasn't played as well as he typically does when it comes to stopping the run. And people didn't even think he was playing. This is his worst season by far. Now it's early. I think he was a little bit underrated as a rookie in his second season. Now, as a rookie, he got hurt, so a lot of it, he didn't play. But early, in fact, they were a completely different team when he got hurt. That's why they had to bring in Linval and for his role, and then Dominican Sue for a different role. But, and then they got comfortable with Linval, and he didn't play as much, and he was still struggling with the ankle. Last year was fine in his role. This year he hasn't been fine. And it's still early, and hopefully he bounces back, but you wanted in a scent. And yeah, people were happy about the sack. Yeah, they're always going to be happy about the sack. To me, I don't care about the sack. He's not playing as well as he typically does against the run. And that's a problem. They played one good game. And maybe, he's playing too much in 4-man fronts, and that'll bring up another Pandora's box because he did play very well. Everybody played very well when they had a bunch of 5-man, 6-man fronts in New Orleans. But you can't play that style when the other team is running out 11 personnel and doing quick throws. You can't do that. So, in a lot of ways, Jim Schwartz used to talk about this all the time. It's reactionary defensive football by nature. You got to react to what the offense is doing. They have control. And if I'm playing the Eagles, I'm watching that New Orleans tape and saying, I'm not playing 12. I'm spreading this team out. And to be honest, again, that's another square peg. We talked about Bryce Huff. If you're trying to get Jordan Davis out when they're spreading the field out on the field just because he's Jordan Davis and just because he's the 13th overall pick and blah, 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 and he should be this, he should be that, it's probably a disservice. But you got to play better with 4-man fronts so you can play more 5-man fronts when he's more impactful. It's a whole conundrum.
Yeah, Jordan, he hasn't been good enough, but appreciate the super chat, James Carver. Appreciate everybody in the chat. I'm getting crushed, Johnny Mac, for saying the previous user's username. That's a lose for me, everybody. What do you want me to do? That Greg checks in. That Greg became a member today, so big shout out to that Greg. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate your support of the channel. He checks in with a big super chat here, and he says, "I'm keeping the faith in Hurts." There you go, that Greg. He says, "Remember Kurt Warner led their 2001 Rams to the Super Bowl, throwing 22 ints and 10 fumbles. Also won the MVP. Always find the silver lining. Go Birds." That Greg, I think you're a little optimistic there, but I appreciate the take, Johnny Mac, your response to that.
Yeah, it's always different. Again, nothing's a vacuum. The Rams played the greatest show on turf. Literally did not give a shit if they turned the football over. There I am, curse. I'm Jordan Mailata today. They did not care because they were going to get it right back, and they were going to press, and they were going to go and go and go and go and go. And they were the first team to say that, basically, and say, "Hey, we turn it over, we're going to get it right back and score." The Eagles don't play like that. Nobody plays like that. So I don't like the comparison, but I get when you look at numbers and say you can do this, you can do that. That Rams team was different offensively. Again, greatest show on turf. They turn it over all the time, and then they'd get back and score twice, and you're still looking up at the scoreboard. Very, very rare team. I wouldn't compare them to the Rams.
Appreciated that, Greg.
Those
Thanks.
Rams.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Thanks for checking in, that Greg. Appreciate that. Got a lot of super stat. Appreciate everybody in the chat for the super chats, man. Big support for the channel, so we appreciate it. M. Martine checks in. John is right. It's the players. M. Martine, Johnny Mac's going to love hearing that. Vic's Bear defense was anchored by Hicks, Mack, Smith, and Jackson. Jordan Davis is no Hicks. N'Kobe's no Roquan. Huff is no Mack. And C.J. Gardner-Johnson is no prime Eddie Jackson. Well put by M. Martine. Johnny Mac, your response.
Yeah, well, that's 100% true. I mean, I always talk about Akeem Hicks. He was one of the most underrated players in the NFL at the time. He was an absolute monster on those defenses. And, yeah, that combo up front with Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith, obviously, one of the best linebackers in football. The Eagles certainly don't have that. And yeah, Eddie Jackson was a playmaker that I would say was way more consistent than CJ, to say the least. So yeah, it's always you will never ever hear me say it's not players first. I always say good times, bad times, mediocre times. It's a player driven league. And the more talent you have, the better you are. The Eagles have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the football. I think people overrate the talent they have. Most Eagles fans on the defensive side of the football. And yeah, those four players specifically, yeah, they don't have, with the exception, I think Reed's pretty good, but I think he's a little bit underrated, but they don't have anybody close to Hicks or Mack.
Reed had a little bit of a drop off. He was playing well, but he wasn't so great in the last game. And
Tampa, yeah. Which, by the way, I'm surprised that that's a guy who never sweats. As said, Gratz, man, dude never sweats, and even the heat got to him. Yeah, I'm not saying he's going to be Ronnie Lott every game. I just think he's solid, and that's why I don't put Eddie of that group. Eddie, very good player. He wasn't Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith. Those guys were like all pro level. I don't put him in love. He was a good playmaker. He was like CJ with more consistency in 2022.
Good stuff there. Appreciate it. And our team for the super chat. Alexander Harris checks in. Appreciate it, Alexander. He says, just expect a $50 million quarterback to be better than that. Yes, Josh Allen is Josh Allen and Stafford is Stafford, but they do more with less. Alexander's not happy with Jalen Hurts right now.
Well, that's fine. I mean, the money part, like, I don't know why fans are so obsessed with the money part. I mean, I get
because I do think, but I think, I think that's what makes them think that they have an elite quarterback.
Well, that's the cost of doing business in the NFL. Like, when Jalen Hurts signed that contract, he was the highest paid player in the history of football for 10 minutes until, and I'm exaggerating, but it was like 2 weeks or something.
But I know it's doing business, but John, when what you just said, when you make somebody the highest paid player in the history of the NFL, that creates expectations, whether they're fair or unfair. That creates.
Well, I'm just saying, my recommendation would be to get over the money and not worry about the money as much. That's part of it. I mean, that's just if you have an accomplished quarterback, you have to pay. That's the going rate. And Dak Prescott was the latest. So now I'm trying to look up
There's
where.
a few that I guess got under that, like Baker Mayfield got 3 years, $100 million.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't. Baker Mayfield was a reclamation project.
Yeah, Baker
So
Mayfield's playing a lot better football than Jalen Hurts.
Well,
is.
he is, but you
Yeah,
know,
when it comes to the contract, I get it.
I'm talking about just specifically contracts. So right now it goes, you know, I'm trying to look where he is on the list. He's 11th on the list as far as guaranteed money. I mean, technically he's a bargain, which is part of the success of Howie Roseman being proactive in these types of situations. So I wouldn't worry too much about the contract part of it. As far as, you know, the play part of it, yeah, it's all legitimate. It's not legitimate because of the contract, because that's just innate. What do you want to do? If you don't want to pay a quarterback at the going rate, then you're stuck with Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee or somebody else. And people can say what they want and say, well, Tanner McKee would do as well as him. No, he wouldn't. You'd be abjectly a disaster. Look at what happened to Miami. I'm not even a big Tua fan. Tua is a mediocre NFL quarterback who can, you know, throw the football. If he's got a clean pocket and everything's 100%, he can look like $1 million. Or in this case,
isn't what you just said
million.
about Tua the same about Jalen? If everything around him is perfect, he can be great.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of quarterbacks like that. Jared Goff,
I know,
like
but
that.
that's where
I
I think
saw
people
Jared
are
Goff
saying.
have a perfect game. Jared Goff has been at times one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah,
What's
true.
I
also think Jared Goff is underrated from
so do I. I say it all the time. But he's not the guy who's going to be making plays out of his what, like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. He needs everything pristine around him, and he's got a great situation. But there are so many players. I mean, Dak Prescott. Here's the list: Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, which is a disgrace, Tua, all ahead of Jalen Hurts. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about the money. I'd worry about the pocket presence. You know, it's just a going rate. The money is the going rate is all.
Yeah, I get that part of it.
Yeah. But yeah, he's got to improve, but the contract has nothing to do with it.
Let's keep going. James Carver, appreciate it, brother. Second super chat today from James Carver. I think it's similar to your other one, but we're going to read it anyway. I love JC and Milton, but JD has been the only one to play gap and a half correctly, especially on first and second. The others always try to always jump ball and scream upfield versus playing the tough shoulder, then covering the backside via arms over elbows. So he's basically saying everybody else is rushing the passer. Jordan Davis is actually playing the position the right way. John, you've been underwhelmed with Jordan Davis, and you were one of the guys who kind of talked me off the ledge with him in terms of what to expect.
Yeah, I don't think he's played as well as he, and maybe it is just as I said, maybe it is he's playing too much in 4-man fronts, which he's not suited for. But if you're looking at those interior guys, I mean, Carter's played the best by far. And he's not played up to the level you want, but he's still been the best by far. And, you know, different role, certainly. And then you would say, you know, as far as just purely handling their role, you could make a strong argument that the best, in a very limited sample size, that the best Eagles interior defensive lineman has been Thomas Booker, which is not good.
Yeah.
Nothing against Thomas. He's doing his role. He's doing what he's supposed to do. But he plays limitedly for a reason, and you need the other guys to step up and play better. And that includes Jordan and Milton. Because I don't think Milton has played nearly as well as I expected. And I think Morrow's been fine, but again, he's sort of more in the Thomas Booker role in that he's limited. But the guys who got to carry it are Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams. And I would argue all three have been less than what they should be. but Carter's the closest to at least to what he should be.
Carter's been great. He's just inconsistent.
Yeah, well, and he was great in New Orleans, and last in Tampa, the whole game plan was, which I'm surprised it isn't every week, but and he's going to continue to get that attention until the other guys start to step up a little bit.
We'll see how this team comes out of this bye week, everybody. Stay Quads checks in. Appreciate it, Stay Quads. Hopefully you're still in the chat. I think I still see in there. He said Vic's scheme is supposed to stop the big play, but we get shredded with 15 to 20-yard passes. So who cares if we stop 25-plus yard plays? No pressure or tackling. You got a good point. It felt like every play the Buccaneers picked up was a 15 to 20-yard gain.
Yeah, I'd say I think the bad tackling is going to be the excuse, and that concerns me because.
Yeah, you're right. That's where he's going to go.
Yeah. So I wish, because I'm with you. I mean, I look, I am sick of this scheme. And if I were a fan, yeah, I mean, the last thing I want to see is a passive defense if I'm a fan. Especially in this city, with the history of this city.
Yeah.
And they
green, and I mean, all
they care about is defense, and they got to watch this passive nonsense. In many ways, it's just modern football. Like I say it all the time, and people get mad at me, but I'm sorry. This is a crappy product as a whole in the NFL. I shouldn't be saying that. I make my living covering this league, but it is what it is. It's a crappy product, and offensively, it's a crappy product, and everybody does, the same stuff, the college stuff, the bubble screen stuff, the tunnel screens, the nonsense, because they can't develop quarterbacks to read the entire field. And they scale things back and dumb things down. It's a bad product. Defensively, it's turned into this. All right, let's play the safeties in the parking lot, and let's make these dumb quarterbacks go 17 yards, 17 plays down the field, and hopefully they'll make a dumb decision. That's basically the NFL has become the arena football league. Everybody plays the same way. And I'm there's a little hyperbole, not everybody, because there's tremendous, I talk about there's the Floreses of the world, and Todd Bowles, you just saw one of them, who are more aggressive defensively, but a vast part of this league is dumbed down to a problematic degree.
Is there going to be a sea change soon?
No, because the college players are getting to the NFL with a lack of preparation. And by the way, the NFL complains about that. They shouldn't complain about that. For years, they had a free feeder system, and they became entitled. And now that they don't have it, they want it. Why are these guys so unprepared? Because they're trying to win to keep their jobs. And how does the game that started it all was Appalachian State, Michigan, for those who know, where Appalachian State just spread the field on Michigan, and Michigan was like, what the hell is going on here? And it condensed the talent disparity and enables people to compete. And their job is to win games at their level, not to prepare players for the NFL. So you can complain all you want, but you got to develop these players, especially at the quarterback position, when they get to the NFL level. And too many people don't do it or can't do it, so they dumb it down as much as possible. And that's where you see the constant the regurgitation of the same plays over and over again. You see the constant, I don't have no original ideas, so let me copy what Vic Fangio's doing on defense.
Give me a Brian Flores defense right now, Johnny Mac.
Well, I know Philadelphia would like it.
Yeah.
But guess what? The minute they get beat deep, like they had a 28-point lead and they gave it up because they're getting gashed because, they're not, there is something to the situational aspect of it. And, this is what Chip Kelly couldn't get, and putting your foot on the gas, taking you off the gas, understanding the situation, scaling back. Sometimes you want to play cover too, and you want to keep people, if you have a big lead, and you want to keep people in front of you, and you don't want to give them hope by getting them back in the game. But so, there's good parts to both sides, but after 4 years of watching this scheme, yeah, I've had enough of it.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you and all of the city has had enough of this thing. I wonder what Vic is going to say to that. You don't think Vic would ever think about doing anything differently, right?
No, well, I think that's unfair. I think he does a lot differently. I think you saw.
I mean, from an overall scheme perspective.
No, he's not changing the scheme, but I think you saw the brilliance of Vic Fangio against New Orleans. We all went in there going, how do you stop this? How do you stop this? I'm the first one. I was angry at myself after the game, to be honest, for not figuring it out.
Yep.
And he rolls that out. And I asked a bunch of players during the week, I said, when were you guys practicing that in training camp, or did he just roll it out? And he just rolled it out. Because he's willing to do some different things, and he'll adjust. And he's changed. I always say when he started this thing, it was quarters coverage was his default setting. When he spins off from the same looks, and then it turned into cover 3, and now it's cover 8. Evidently, he's been using more cover 8 than anything else this year, very early. But so he changes, but the shell of the scheme is not going to change.
No doubt. Let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Great super chats today. Everybody, I got a good topic for John coming up out of the break. When we get back, we'll continue to kick around this football game as we move into the bye week. Eagles bye week 2-2. I'm going to talk a little Nick Sirianni though with John. I know John is doesn't like to blame much on Nick, but I do want to push a little bit back on it and see what John has to say.
That's not true. I love to blame Nick.
You think Nick gets too much blame, correct? Or no?
Yeah, well, that's every coach and quarterback.
Yeah, well, no doubt. We'll talk about it a little bit when we get back on Birds 365. Appreciate everybody being here. Hit that like button. Back in 3 minutes.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, October 1st, moving deep into the fall now as we get out of September. When does summer officially end, John? Is it like is it over?
September 22nd.
22nd, yeah, right in there. So getting into that fall months now, October coming up, Thanksgiving around the corner in November, and then we'll be into the holidays, Christmas, New Year. This thing's going to go by very quick, so enjoy it. Everybody. John, I got, let's talk about Nick Sirianni a little bit. And I have understood a lot of what you said, where he's obviously going to take so much of the blame. But where are you on Nick? Do you think there should be, does he deserve some of this blame? They've lost 10 of their last 13 games. It almost seems like the team is now used to losing. Versus the season before that, it was like you talk about it all the time. They were like 27-2. They never lost.
Yeah.
How we've taken on this, identity of really a loser in the last 13 games. Do you think it's a big problem? And do you think Nick Sirianni, does have some accountability here and should be at blame for some of this stuff?
Well, sure. He's to blame. As he always says, his name's on all of it. It's all his responsibility. It's his responsibility to change things on offense, defense, special teams. If he decides there needs to be change, that's one of the things I brought up with the Big Fangio stuff. Like, do you feel comfortable doing that with somebody of that experience level? If it needs to be done, and there's questions whether he can even do it if he wanted to do it. From the standpoint of Jeffrey Lurie and how he set this thing up. Now, from talking to Nick, he claims he still has the ability to do it. And I know a lot of people don't believe that. I do believe he hired the coordinators. They were not hired for him. In the case of Big Fangio, I think it's kind of not that big of a deal because I think everybody was on board with that hire. In the case of Kellen Moore, I think Cliff Kingsbury would have been seriously considered, but evidently wanted to change too much of the offensive coaching staff. And that's why, by the way, why I believe Nick in the fact that, for those who don't know, most of the offensive coaching staff are Nick's guys and were kept from obviously Jeff Stoutland, but also Jamal Singleton and Jason Michael and Aaron Moorhead, and most notably Kevin Patullo, who's his right-hand man. Those are all Nick's guys, and they were all kept, which is an indication that he still has that ability to hire and fire guys. But and I don't even know if that's a good thing because the setup is so disjointed. But as far as blame, yeah, I mean, it's his team. He deserves all the blame. And that's part of being a coach. And he knows that. He talks about it all the time. Same with Jalen Hurts, although I don't think Jalen understands it as much. Like, if you lose, it's on you. If you win, it's on you. So there's good and there's bad to it. But that's everywhere. It's no different. There might be a bigger microscope in Philadelphia because of the passion and all that stuff, but it's the same in every NFL city for the coach and the quarterback. Same in every NFL city. Every single one of them.
Both of them here have underperformed. I mean, you could argue how much or how much is on them, but I do think both of them have underperformed. John, if they lost that Saints game, and I know it's a coulda, woulda, shoulda, if scenario that I don't like to play, but if they lost New Orleans and they were going into this bye week at 1-3, would it be possible that they have fired Nick at this point.
No. That's just not the way Jeffrey does business. And who are you going to hire? I mean,
maybe elevate Kellen for the year if you think if you think he puts your team in a better chance to make a run with this offense.
That's just
That's why I said it, because they have. It's not like they don't have. Like last year, you would have said that and been like, yeah, you're right. Who the hell would it have been a head coach? This year, you kind of have Fangio and Kellen, both of whom have been around for, not Kellen hasn't been around that long. Fangio's been a head coach in the league.
And then you probably upset Vic because he's been a head coach and Kellen hasn't. Yeah, say what you want about that's the stuff that really, really, and not to mention you have such an early bye week, and not to mention you're playing without AJ, and you're going to make that rash decision. I mean, that's not Jeffrey Lurie. And to his credit, I don't even put that into the equation. And rightfully so. Now, the one time he moved on from a coach early was Chip Kelly, and it was one game. And think about what kind of disaster that was. And he even rode that out. And Pat Shurmur coached the last game. So, no, I mean, that would be completely, now if you start say 0-4 and AJ was playing and Devontae was playing and Lane was playing the entire time, then I would, then I would start to entertain the question, even though I still don't think he'd do it, because I just don't think he would like to do it in season. Certainly he'd be fired after the season. I can't picture them doing that. But if you just look at the context of what has gone on, like I say to myself, one of the worst things about the early bye from this team's perspective, just in general, you're going to be as banged up as they are. They're going to be banged up. They're going to need it late in the season more. So just from the general perspective of that, plus you do your self-scout during this bye week and you don't have information to do a good self-scout. It's way too early. And then you add in the fact that the context of the games, the shitty field in Green Bay, the temperatures in Tampa, the injuries. There's no clear evaluation of this team right now. So from that aspect, it's just from that aspect, it's way, way unfair to even consider it. And even at 1-3, once AJ comes out, it's been history. Now you could say, and I agree with you, they got to be able to handle losing AJ Brown a little bit better. And they just don't. And that's a big disappointment. But to fire somebody when he doesn't have his best player over that short sample size, they played one game with the guy and they look like world beaters with the shitty field and all the yardage to the point that they were number 2 in the NFL. If they start playing like this with AJ Brown, then you got some issues, but you got to wait.
Yeah, it's not just the fan sentiment, though, John. I'll say, Marcus Hayes, who I respect greatly, Cilio had him on last week. Their interview was really good. I think Marcus Hayes does a really good job. The Pen with No Fear, he writes, Nick Sirianni's, and this was the title of the article, so I don't want to, maybe he didn't say to fire him, but Nick Sirianni's Eagles remain undisciplined, unacceptable, and unwatchable. Should he be fired? That's Marcus Hayes' title of his latest column that he put up 2 days ago now. So after the Eagles game on Sunday, but I will say it's starting, you're starting to see more of that across the region, both from fans and now also from, reporters like yourself.
Well, Marcus is a columnist. Marcus has been on the show many times. I love Marcus. Marcus is a good friend of mine, but he's that's his job to give his opinion. And that's fine. it's a little bit different than my job, although I sort of straddle
Yeah,
three
because you're running the
fences.
show. Right.
But if you're asking my opinion on should he be fired, that's different than will he be fired by this organization, and it's different than should he be fired. Like I say all the time, I try to straddle these fences as best as possible. Like I hate the defensive scheme. When people for years said, "Well, you like Jonathan Gannon," I still said I hated the defensive scheme. I do like him
Jonathan
personally.
Gannon looks like a genius.
Yeah,
What
well,
he
not
did
to the
with
fact that I
defensive
was
team.
right, but even the fact that I was right, and I do like him personally.
70 sacks with this scheme. Are you crazy? That's insane.
I never backed off to the fact that I dislike the scheme and the reasons why. So it's different. Like I think Nick Sirianni, and I've said this pretty consistently, is set up for failure with this setup. Too many setups in that sentence, but you get the point. He is set up to fail with this situation. And by the way, the organization is set up to fail. That's why I blame Jeffrey Lurie. So I turn towards Jeffrey Lurie more than I turn towards Nick Sirianni when it comes to that. And I have no problem criticizing the owner of this team. It is a bad setup. And guess what? It's a bad setup from the organization because as I said, if everything continues to go the way it's going right now, and it won't because, as I said, the offense is going to be fine, and Vic will at least get them a little bit better. But for the sake of this game, let's play it out. And they're just bad and underachieving, and they're an 8-8 team or an 8-9 team, 17 games. And he's done. He's fired. Well, that means Kellen Moore's out too, and that means Vic Fangio's most likely out too. And then you're starting all over again with Jalen Hurts, another play caller, another offensive-minded coach. Is he going to learn this system? Is he going to do this? Can certain this manufacturer, whoever name you want?
You better hope that doesn't happen because you know who's going to be in the bullseye next. It's going to be him.
Yeah, at that point he will be. But you get my point, and the whole thing starts over again. And everybody says, it to me, one of the most amazing things in the world is you had all these people who were so sure the problem was Brian Johnson and Sean Desai and Nick Sirianni. And now they're seeing some of the same problems with guys with pristine reputations, and they don't recognize it. They don't recognize the fact that it's about execution. It's not about scheme. It is about tackling. It's not sexy. When Vic goes up there, and I got to leave as soon as this show's off the air to get down there. When he gets up there today, I guarantee he talks about the tackling first. He said, well, if we tackle, and he's right to a certain degree. He's right. How boring is that? It's not about some exotic scheme. You see the difference. Kellen Moore's motion and Kellen Moore's this and Kellen Moore's ability to get people open, and Nick Sirianni wasn't. Well, you see the Kellen Moore offense with AJ and Devontae and Lane versus the Kellen Moore offense without him. He ain't scheming nobody into nothing if they can't play. And that's not a criticism of Kellen Moore. You're not out there. You got Jahan Dotson instead of AJ Brown. Good freaking luck.
But a little. What about then? Well, all right, that's fair. But what about the general lack of preparation, the lack of discipline, the penalties? He's just like that's where I think Cayden was right. He preaches fundamentals. They suck fundamentally. They are awful fundamentally. If
Well,
you
they
zoomed
certainly
out on
were
this team and
tackling
said,
wise. You
oh,
know, but here's the thing. All right, I'm going to look it up. And again, forever, I happen to have a subscription to PFF. So I know certain people hate that. So you can go to True Media, you can go to Next Gen Stats, whatever you like. Go to whatever you like and look up tackling in the NFL. I'm looking it up right now. All right. The best tackling team is Detroit. That doesn't include last night's game, so we'll see. Pittsburgh, Houston, Baltimore, Carolina. The mighty Carolina Panthers are the best tackling teams in the NFL. In theory, you would expect the Eagles to be the worst, certainly coming off that game. They are 23rd. There are 9 teams worse than them. Las Vegas being the worst, Jacksonville, our poor buddy Doug Peters, Cleveland, which should be helpful. Tampa Bay, which, by the way, that was a big narrative coming into that game, how bad Tampa was tackling early in the season. Miami, Jets, Rams, Cowboys, Cincinnati Bengals, all worse than the Eagles. They're the only team that can't tackle. That's the modern NFL.
Yeah.
That is the modern NFL. They don't practice tackling. They're not allowed to practice tackling because of safety issues. And guess what? When you don't practice something, it's bad. And sometimes it's worse in certain games than other games. And it just happened to be really bad in the Tampa game. They're not going to be really that bad. I would imagine that's going to be their worst tackling game of the season. That would be my bet. I can't see them being worse, but we'll see. Plenty of time to go.
It would be pretty hard to get worse than that.
Plenty of time to go. The point is, it ain't just an Eagles problem. What I was talking about on that tangent about the NFL as a whole.
That doesn't excuse the problem, though. I mean, if you talk about zigging when everyone zags and being the trendsetters and being the forward-thinking organization. Well, fucking tackle.
Well,
I mean,
how do you teach tackling when you can't teach tackle?
I get it. I mean, I guess that's part of it as well. It's now been legislated out of the game. Back to the point that you always bring up, the over legislation of this league. Somebody was in here talking about it earlier. I guess. So Nick
they start every practice, and you can ask anybody who's at practice. They start every practice with tackling circuits, as they call them, where groups go from stage to stage, practicing the technique and the fundamentals of tackling without tackling. So, hey, you're in the right position, and then you don't finish, or you're not allowed to finish. They work on it.
Also, is Fangio's scheme just suck as well for tackling? I mean, these dudes are playing, 10 yards off. Hey, what are you going to do? Run at Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin and tackle him?
No.
I mean,
well, again, no, there's very few of them, but one of the commenters before mentioned Roquan Smith, a linebacker.
Yeah.
He's a better tackler than Nakobe Dean. I always talk about Antoine Winfield Sr. As a corner. There are very few corners that tackle well, but when they do, they do. And there's a few of them. I'll look up right now who the best tackling corners are. There aren't a lot of them.
No, there's not.
But there's a few.
Slager says that's like Eric Clapton trying to get better by playing air guitar.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's a problem with the game. Like, it's not like, I think there's this mentality, and I went through it with Jody a lot, that other teams are doing like old school tackling drills. I hear it from Seth all the time as well. It ain't the case.
So you can't really put blame on the coaches. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's this mentality that other teams are tackling and the Eagles aren't. That's what I'm saying. That's not the case. The best tackling corner or the best run support corner is 100-year-old Stephon Gilmore early in the season. Carlton Davis, you got to see him last night. He's a big physical corner.
Yeah, he is.
That makes sense. Charian Jones from Jacksonville, can't even tell you about that. Devin Witherspoon is a great player. Again, you saw him last night. Man, there aren't a lot. And Gilmore, again, is almost, old school, almost on the fringe of what they do now versus what they did before. So he's got a little bit more experience. The guys coming in, man, they don't help you all that much in run support. And you gotta make do with what you have. But the assumption that the Eagles aren't practicing tackling, but insert name is not the case. Nobody tackles.
Nobody. A league-wide problem. We'll see what they're able to do after the bye week. John, I know you got to get out of here a little early. Just your final thoughts on this Tuesday, coming off a tough loss versus the Bucs. Your final thoughts on where this team is 2-2 going into the bye.
I think they're fine from the perspective. When we did our stupid "that's a win, that's a loss" when the schedule comes out, I think I had them 2-2 at the bye. I thought it was going to be a slower start this year, and ironically, I think if they stayed healthy, they'd be better than where I thought they were going to be. So from that standpoint, I think if you step back and take the 30,000-foot view, as Nick likes to talk about it, I don't think it's nearly as dire as people think. My problem, I'm just sick of this defensive scheme, which has nothing to do with the end game. It'll get better. Can it get good enough? Probably not defensively. And the offense is going to have to carry this team. And they have the talent to do it. And that's where we get into the nitpicking of Kellen Moore on a week-to-week basis when they get healthy, and then even more so Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts has got to get better. So that's a concern. He's got to get better.
No doubt. He's got to be way better. Good stuff today, Johnny Mac. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button for us here on Birds 365. Twiz, Flexen's in here. I'm awake. Appreciate it, all of you guys, for being in here. A lot of great members today. WCBJ, Jay's in here. So good stuff, everybody. Thanks for being in here. Thanks for the super chats today. Got a lot of them. That'll do it for today's Birds 365. Johnny Mac's got to run, get down to the NovaCare Complex. Make sure you tune in 2 to 6 today. The National Football Show with Dan Cilio coming up later on, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. Birds 365, 8 to 10 a.m. Johnny Mac, good show, brother.
All right, thanks, everybody.
See you next time, everyone.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.